Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm CJ Vogel, joined every Tuesday by Gerry Hamilton here for the recruiting breakdown. Of course, today we're going to be talking about some Texas leans. Who's Texas kind of leading the pack for early on, right? It's only the middle of February, a long way to go. But right now, you can kind of get an idea of how this class might shake out. We'll run through some of that as well as an updated look at the 22 official visitors that we have locked in so far for the month of June. That list just keeps growing and growing. And Gerry and I have been putting up all sorts of updates on ontexasfootball.com. Gerry's been killing it over there. But right now, before we dive into some of these who's Texas leaning for questions y'all might have, a quick word from our sponsor, Mark Saunders and Allstate.
Well, I can tell you who Texas fans should be leaning to for their insurance. That's Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all of it, everything? Here's some great news. Texas Allstate agent and alum Mark Saunders serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you need. That's everything from your home and your car and your boat to your motorcycle, RV, and that ATV for those hunters out there. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Again, that's 512-218-8571. If you're in the Austin or Round Rock area or the entire state of Texas, you'll be in great hands with Texas alum Mark Saunders.
Perfect. Thank you, Gerry. And thank you, Mark Saunders, for sponsoring the recruiting breakdown. All right, let's pivot on over to the offensive side of the ball. 3 players committed right now, starting at quarterback. That's Dia Bell, wide receiver Chris Stewart out of Shadow Creek, and offensive lineman, the newest member of the 26 Texas class, Max Wright out of Melissa. But starting at running back, because I think this is an interesting conversation here, Gerry. There's a number of in-state guys that Texas likes, but there's also a few out-of-state guys Texas like. Is there a couple guys that you're looking at Texas going after? Two-man class once again? Is that first and foremost? Is that what we believe to be the case?
Yeah, I think it'll be a two-man class again. I think you have 4 guys for sure that are definitely very high on the board. A 5th would be a KJ Edwards at Carthage. We'll see if he officially visits. But, when we're talking about trending Texas, who would be trending the Texas of that group? I think Amari Latimer is. I think he's out of Sandy Creek High in Tyrone, Georgia. He has a couple uncles that played at Miami, but I think Tashard Choice and him have a really strong relationship. Tashard Choice has been on him as long as any Power 4 running back coach has been. He's been on campus a couple of times. I think Amari Latimer continues to trend toward Texas. I think Javian Osborne, you could throw a 50-50 on that thing with Texas and Michigan.
Right.
And then Notre Dame making a run with Marcus Freeman in Georgia. But I would throw some 50-50, and you could push that one way or the other. But I would say for sure trending Texas right now, I think Amari Latimer's in that group.
How far off do you think a guy like Xavier Crowell is from this top group for Texas? Of course, he visited last year for essentially a one-on-one visit with Tashard Choice and the Texas staff. That was, of course, as a 2027. He has since reclassified. Is he close to this bunch as well? I know he has an official visit set up for June 6th.
I think so. Look, and that's Alabama, Auburn, Texas, Georgia. I mean, what a battle for one of the top running backs in the country, man. Gird up your loins, as we say on OTF, right? But, yeah, he definitely is. He's been on campus multiple times. He was at the Georgia game with his mom. They came from Jackson, Alabama. So he's been on campus twice before. And now that he reclassed to 26, he's in that group as well. Again, I think it's Javian Osborne, Amari Latimer, Xavier Crowell, and Derek Cooper out of Chaminade, Madonna, in Hollywood, Florida. And I think if there's a 5th guy that could make an official visit, it'll be KJ Edwards. I think Derek Cooper will visit this spring, and we'll see where things go from there.
Yeah, that'll be really interesting. Tashard Choice, of course, looking to bring in another successful 2-man haul this spring, this cycle. But moving to wide receiver, Texas has one in the fold right now with Chris Stewart down out of Shadow Creek. Gerry, this feels a little bit more wide open than it's been, but of course it wasn't until the middle of spring where Jamie French started to really come along. It wasn't until much later in the cycle last year where Damon McCutcheon was flipped for the Longhorns as well. Are we looking at a very similar path again in 26 in terms of, okay, it might take a month or 2 months, maybe even up to 4 or 5 months to get, really the clearer picture at wide receiver?
Yeah, I 100% think so. And that's because, look, Caden Finley likes Notre Dame, right? He's scheduled to be at Texas June 20th. That's going to be a little bit of a battle there for Texas. Caden Dixon Wyatt out of Modern Day has been on campus 2 or 3 times. We'll be back in June for an official visit. More than likely, he hasn't set his date yet. We'll see if he comes back in the spring. Then you get to the newly offered Tristan Keys. He put out his list of visits. Texas wasn't on it. We didn't expect him to be because he needs to come make a first unofficial visit to Texas ever this spring and see if it's even a fit for him and his family in Texas. If it is, I think Texas will get an official visit out of him. Naeem Burrows, Jacksonville Bowl School, same thing. Aaron Gregory, the A&M commitment at Douglas County in Georgia, same thing. Then you have, what happens with, a Booby Feaster. Does he reclass to 26? Does he stay in 27? There's been some chatter. He's thinking about reclassing to 26. If he does, that adds another person to that mix. So that's kind of receivers wide open right now. Right. And I know people want answers, but I don't think Texas has the answers right now. I think that's just the reality.
Of course, again, going back to last year, it took quite a while to get that clear picture at wide receiver. Speaking of the 3 tight ends, all 3 have official visits on different weekends in the month of June. Mark Bowman at a modern day, Hezzy Kent and Caden Prothrow, a newer name to this tight end picture here, Jerry, but all of which 3 very talented tight ends, all of which have just seen Jatavian Sanders, Gunnar Helm put up big numbers in the Texas offense.
Yeah, and it's too early to say if anybody's trending the Texas out of that group. But Mark Bowman, I feel like Texas is going to end up with a 50-50 shot. Is the competition going to be Georgia, as some expect, or is it going to be Oregon? He's visiting Texas June 6th through 8th. There's a lot of, obviously, ties to Austin area in the state of Texas through his father's side of the family. Then, Hezzy Kent is out of Brunswick, Georgia, an area Texas has never signed a player, really recruited. He's the 6'5", 300-pound tight end who be maybe an offensive lineman, maybe a tight end, maybe that 6th offensive lineman is a tight end. We'll see where his frame goes. I think Texas has a ways to go in that one. I think they're playing from behind. Caden Prothrow, who is going to probably be ranked as a 2 or 3 tight end in the country. Mark Bowman will be ranked 1. That 6'5", 220-pound long limb guy who can really run. Texas getting the June 20th visit for him. I think Texas is working from behind on that one as well. So right now, Bowman's the best shot. We'll see what happens because it's a long way until July and August decisions. But it's too early to say somebody's trending to Texas at tight end. But the next position is going to be a little more fun.
Yeah, there's plenty of guys that we believe currently that are trending or at least have Texas very, very close to the top of their list at the moment. Of course, I mentioned Max Wright just committed to the Longhorns about a week ago, but several other offensive linemen, and we're picturing a 5 or 6 man offensive line class, Jerry. Right now, I think you could get pretty darn close to filling that up right now with how many guys have Texas close to their leader, if not at the very top.
Yeah, this is crying from a yacht, first world problems, right? Crying from a yacht, as Sark says, first world problems, Rod Baber says. Look, if you said who is leaning to Texas among the offensive line recruits, I would say, well, Turntine, and that doesn't mean these guys are going to end up at Texas, but right now on February 11th, Turntine, 5-star, Samuel Rosenborough, out of Clearwater, one of the top 75 prospects in the country. Sam Utu, offensive tackle / volleyball outside hitter at 6'5", 300 pounds, 6'4", 295, out of Orange Lutheran in Orange, California, SoCal. Toa Katoa, Euless Trinity, Nicholas Robertson Klein, maybe Felix Ojo.
Right.
Texas is in a really good spot on the offensive line. Yeah. It's now all those guys that are leaning to Texas won't be at the end of the day, because the numbers aren't going to work, the math's not going to work, and positionally it's not going to work for some guys when looking at who commits to Texas. But right now, I think Texas is in a tremendous place in offensive line recruiting. But again, long way to go until these guys announce decisions. Some of them. I think there's a chance a couple of these guys could decide before June official visits, similar to what Max Wright did.
Yeah, and we've seen that in years past as well. Guys trying to find their spot in the class before the official visits come. We'll see. One guy I did want to mention is Felix Ojo. And I know he kind of gets put on the outside in Texas circles because of the John Turntine conversation. Look, he's a big fan of Texas early on. So we'll see how this all progresses. But flipping on over to the defensive side of the ball, defensive line, Dylan Behrman's a name that we've tossed out several times. He's a big fan of Texas. You've gone down to see him several times. Who else joins him on that defensive line class? Is it too early to tell there as well?
Yeah, it's to be determined. Jamion Winfield out of Richardson is very, very high on the board. And Kendall Gerville out of Fort Myers, extremely high on the board. Those are both battles. I mean, Winfield's from Meridian, Mississippi, moved to Texas, moved to the DFW area, Richardson in July. Mm-hmm. Not a native Texan, right? And not a kid that grew up with a UT jersey on by any means, right? So those are battles. I think Texas is in a pretty good spot for Dylan Behrman. Now, LSU did send Brian Kelly and the whole Calvary up to Ouachita Parish, which that is a different level from an LSU staff of recruiting. So we'll see USC, A&M, Miami, also in that Ole Miss as well for Berryman. But he has a really good relationship with Kenny Baker, and Kenny Baker went through there the last day of January. He was out on the road. But I think it's to be determined. I think they're going to be in on guys like Vodney Cleveland from Birmingham, who was a one-time Alabama commitment. We'll see what happens there. Manuel Ruffin out of Bessemer City, Alabama. These are real battles. So it's way too early to go there on who could be trending Texas on the D-line. But we know this. There are going to be battles, and those are some of the bigger battles and some of the fourth quarter battles in this class.
Of course, Bryce Perry White, right, the only other
good one
defensive lineman with an official visit. He and Dylan Behrman right now set to come in June 13th to Austin, visit the Longhorns there. But moving out to defensive end, one name that we've consistently heard of is Jamarian Carlton out of Temple. Another name I wanted to throw out there that Texas visited, or at least had some visits from in the spring last year, was Jermaine Kinsler out of Bergen Catholic up in New Jersey. We'll see if that's a name that pops up later in the spring as well. But Jerry, this position right now, defensive end, another one that feels like we'll see more development as the summer months come rolling around.
Another one's Luke Waffle out of up in New Jersey, which is a kid that likes Texas. Texas likes him. Where does the push come from on that? Texas offered 4 defensive linemen from the Charlotte area. One of those a 5-star Rodney Durham, which I think probably is a South Carolina lean at this point. But it's going to come down to Trenton Henderson from Pensacola Catholic told me 2 nights ago he wants to get on campus at Texas. He doesn't have anything planned yet, probably in the spring. It's going to come down to who do they get on campus out of all these national guys they've offered in January that didn't have offers previous. Sean Scott from Mater Dei is one that I think Texas has a legit chance at. He's a kind of that hybrid edge linebacker, similar to Trey Moore with a little bit longer frame. So out of Mater Dei there, Sean Scott, who's been on campus, I believe, 3 times over the years. But nobody we can say is trending Texas right now that Texas is all in on. And I think that's the key to remember. So Offensive line was easy. Defensive line, not so easy right now.
And of course, that picture may be a little bit more clear at linebacker. Texas just had a heck of a haul when you start to consider Brad Spence, Bo Barnes, Jonathan Cunningham a year previously. But looking at this picture right now, especially for official visitors coming up, Tyson Ajayakowo, the Texas Tech commit out of Georgetown Eastview, he's got an official visit set up that you broke 2 nights ago, Jerry. And then you start looking at Tank King. You look at Kosi Okpala. There's a number of really talented Houston prospects, or that Golden Triangle area that Texas is starting to hit as well. Linebacker starting to feel like you'll have a brighter picture, clearer picture at the moment.
And in on some big-time out-of-state guys. When will a Tyler Atkinson visit? Will his teammate Anthony Davis come with him? Will the recent offer there, Marietta Kell, make a visit as well? We'll see on that. He doesn't have anything set up right now. But as far as the in-state guys, look, Kosi Okpala was a Texas lean most of the season. A&M made a push there. He went to both junior days. He told me, though, his official visits are Texas, Penn State, Baylor right now, and probably Houston unless A&M replaces that. So it's hard to say Texas probably isn't his lean right now. Obviously, Thiessen's one that Texas fans want just to take Joey McGuire's lunch money in recruiting. And, I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? But he's a really talented player, young kid, kind of has some similarities to Brad Spence from a physicality and tool standpoint, which would be good news if he plays up to that level. But I think linebackers kind of to be determined. But you said, is somebody trending to Texas? I would say it's Kosi Okpala. I think how hard does Texas push with Tank King? Because if they really push for him, I think they become the team to beat.
I agree. I went down and saw him at Port Arthur Memorial for a workout about a week ago. Big fan of Texas, but a number of other schools that he wants to get to. He says he's still pretty wide open, a long way to go there. Speaking of which, we'll move to DBs. Texas feels good about Jalen Lott. We've talked about that for a long time. We also think that Jermaine Bishop at cornerback is an option for the Longhorns as well. Look, you start looking at some of these pieces in the defensive secondary here, Jerry. It feels like, again, that picture very clear about 2 months from now. One name I will throw out, and it'll also depend on where some of these defensive back hirings come in for the staff. That will depend more so on who some of these top targets will be in about a month or so.
That's right. You led me right where I was going. Right now, it's hard to say because there's at least 2 defensive backs positions that Sark's got to hire. Safeties coach, Nichols coach. Does he just hire a defensive back czar over all of it. We'll find out, how does he retool this secondary coaching staff. But until then, it's hard to really say. I mean, look, Chase Calicut, Texas and Oregon are there. Aaron Bradshaw, I think Texas is doing well, but they don't have anybody to call him right now.
Right.
So that's the actual safeties coach. So Donovan Webb at Panther Creek, will he go on campus this spring? So these things are to be determined. One thing I do feel confident about is Jalen Lott, I think, is trending Texas, but look, it's going to be competitive for a top 50 kid in the country. And I think Jermaine Bishop Jr., that was one of the revelations from Junior Day. I think he's trending Texas. But again, these things are a long way from being over. But I do think those are two guys you can say Texas is doing well with while they reshuffle this secondary coaching staff to see kind of where the dust settles, because none of us really know right now where that dust is going to settle, who those hires are going to be.
Yeah, Jerry, I got one more question for you before we look at some of these official visitors. Defensive back, to me, feels like one of those positions very similar to the offensive line, where the in-state crop, very talented. Texas, of course, Jordan Thomas is a name up from the Northeast that kind of comes up every now and then in terms of the defensive back recruiting class as well. But are you seeing an in-state class this year again at the defensive back?
You know, that's a really good question. I'm not sure I have the answer right now, because I think it could be. I don't know if Texas has to go out of state for their safeties in this class. But, again, we have to see who's hired and if the opinions change on who those guys should be. But I will say this. I think it's going to be similar to last year's class. I don't think guys are going to jump into the class early. I think it's going to take a while at defensive back. And now that could change based on who's hired. But I think these are going to play out a little while because, look, they offered a couple of guys in Georgia, right? They've made some new offers. They're out-of-state offers. Are these guys going to get on campus in the spring? Because if they do, like a Jamie French did at wide receiver last year, then that changes the game. That changes the calculus. But we just don't have those answers right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. All right, before we move over to official visits, Jerry, one quick word about our good sponsor, Mark Saunders and Allstate.
Yeah, when it comes to protecting all your stuff, Mark Saunders is the only guy you need. He protects all of it. He serves the Austin and Round Rock area and the entire state of Texas. He's the only insurance agent you need. I promise you that. ATV, RV, motorcycle, car, home, boat, all of it. He's your guy. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. He's a Texas alum. You'll be in great hands with Mark Saunders.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you again, Mark Saunders. All right, I wanted to bring up our little cheat sheet here, Jerry, for the official
Here you go, OTF fans.
This is how I passed every test I ever took, was a little cheat sheet. But 22 official visitors on the list right now. I mentioned the two reclassifications from 27 to 26 lead off June 6th. You got a big weekend coming up June 13th and what will be another big weekend June 20th. Texas fighting once more this year, as we've seen in years previous, to get those final two official visit weekends for most of their top targets. What stands out about this group? I'll start with this one right here. If you start looking at the offensive linemen, that June 20th week, Jerry, that's going to be a special weekend. Yeah,
it is. And it's interesting kind of. That is, I mean, turn time for us, for On Texas Football, turn time's a 5-star. Rosenberg is a 4-star plus. Sam Utu, 4-star plus. Nicholas Robertson, a 4-star plus. Max Wright, obviously a 4-star kid. That is a lot of offensive line talent. And that is a lot of guys that have been on campus a number of times before. Samuel Rosenberg's mom lives in Austin due to work. She had to relocate there. He wanted to stay behind and finish high school with his teammate at Clearwater High and his friends. So there's that. Nicholas Robertson's been on campus a number of times. Then there's the, Kosiak Paul a number of times, Jermaine Bishop a number of times, Caden Finley obviously a number of times. But then there's also Caden Prothro and Sam Utu, who have never been on campus. So will they visit in the spring before the official visit? I would say they will. So that's one of the things I'm looking at. A lot of guys there that have been on campus a lot, save 2 of them. Yeah. I think that's going to be really interesting. Looking back a year, Texas got right up to around 45 official visitors. Right now, 22. So about halfway there in terms of guys who got onto campus, who set official visits. A long way to go in terms of filling out this class as well. I did want to get one more question in for you about the wide receivers. Right now, just Jabari Mack, just Caden Finley. You mentioned a number of out-of-state guys that you believe might make the trip in. Tristan Keys is one.
right as lightning hits thunder, right? It's talking about his speed.
Same in Houston.
That's exactly it. But Tristan Keys is a guy who Texas fans were pretty excited about, hearing that he wanted to hear from the Texas staff. He did release a top 6 that did not include the Longhorns. Is it too early to panic about not giving an official visit here?
Yeah, because it's the same as Jamie French. Look, Jamie French, it was committed to Alabama. Then he dropped the list. Texas wasn't on it. Then he made a spring unofficial visit with his family. And then Texas and the Frenches said, yeah, this could be a really good fit. Then the official visit happens, and then he ends up a Texas Longhorn. Yeah. Tristan Keys has never been to campus. Texas wants him to come visit in the spring unofficially, and meet with the staff, meet with Sark, see if everything's a good fit from his side and from a Texas side. And if it is, then you'll see an official visit by Texas. And I think the same thing with Naeem Burrows out of Bowl School in Jacksonville, Aaron Gregory out of Douglas County in Douglasville, Georgia, the A&M commitment, who's one of the top receivers and prospects in the country. I think it's trending that way with a number of guys. And we got to remember, last year, same thing happened with Josiah Sharma, Myron Charles. They were all spring unofficials. They had never been to campus before. So Texas will work to get those guys on campus in March or April. Then see, okay, yeah, let's move forward with this. Let's get this June official visit, and let's really battle for these guys.
Absolutely. And I wanted to get your thoughts on a theory I have as well. We don't see Diabell's name up here, but we saw how important that June 21st and 23rd weekend was last year when you had KJ Lacey on campus with, and listen to this list of commits on the offensive side of the ball here: James Simon, Jamie French, Khalid Kalakit, Amari Winston, Nick Townsend, the Coleman brothers, and Jackson Christian. You think we're just kind of sitting waiting on when some of these other big official visits might happen, or say, hey, Diabell, set the tone, lock yours in, and we'll try to get these guys in on that same weekend as well?
And I promise CJ had no idea that I talked to Diabell about this morning. We did not set you up, Texas fans. I said, I texted Diaz, your Texas OV June 13th or 20th. That was this morning at 7:38. He responded, I haven't picked which one yet. To CJ's point, I think it's going to depend on how these 2 weekends set up.
So that'll be really interesting. Of course, we'll have all the updates over at On Texas Football and here. So make sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified anytime we post a video. I'm going to get out of here before the house blows away from the tornado, Jerry. So that'll do it for today. Mark Saunders, thank you very much for sponsoring the Recruiting Breakdown. And until next time, y'all have a good one. Hook 'em.